The Underground Champion. The neon lights of New Singapore's underground district painted harsh shadows across Kira Chin's face as she studied the entry form in front of her. The datapad's glow illuminated the dried blood on her knuckles, evidence of another night of unofficial matches in the back alley fighting circuits. Species. The Vracnid clerk clicked its mandibles impatiently, all four of its eyes fixed on her with suspicious interest. Human, Kira replied, keeping her voice steady despite the way the clerk's chitinous appendages twitched at her response. Error. Humans are not permitted in registered matches. The clerk's translator crackled. Choose another establishment. Kira leaned forward, sliding a credit chip across the scratched metal counter. I'm not looking for registered matches. The clerk's antennae quivered, a sign she recognized from her years in the Terran Defense Force as consideration. After what felt like an eternity, one segmented arm reached out and palmed the chip. The Nexus Pits, Level 47, Block C entry through the maintenance shaft. The clerk's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But know this, human, if anyone asks, I never directed you there. The descent to Level 47 gave Kira time to contemplate how she'd ended up here. 6 months ago, she'd been a decorated TDF combat instructor. Now she was about to enter an illegal fighting pit just to keep her sister's medical bills paid. The treatments for radiation poisoning from the Centauri War weren't cheap, and the military pension barely covered basics. The maintenance shaft opened into a cavernous space that hummed with the energy of hundreds of beings from across the galaxy. The air was thick with the scent of various species equivalent of adrenaline and fear. Through the press of bodies, Kira could see the fighting pit, a 30-meter diameter circle surrounded by energy barriers that shimmered with an ominous purple glow. New meat for the grinder, a gravelly voice asked from behind her. Kira turned to face a Draconid, 3 meters of scaled muscle and predatory grace. The alien fight promoter's translator rendered his clicking speech into standard English with a hint of amusement. You're either brave or stupid, human. Perhaps both. I'm here to fight, Kira stated simply. I hear you pay well for winners. The Draconid's secondary eyelids blinked rapidly, their version of laughter. If you survive. Entry fee is 5,000 credits. Winner takes 80% of the betting pool. He paused, studying her with ancient reptilian eyes. Though I should warn you, we don't have many rules here. No weapons, no armor. Everything else. He made a gesture that needed no translation. Kira reached into her jacket and pulled out a credit stick. When's my first match? The sound of roaring crowds filled her ears as she stepped into the preparation area. Through the energy barrier, she could see her first opponent. A Kriaxian warrior, its crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. The betting boards floating above the pit showed the odds stacked heavily against her. Human. The Kriaxian's translated voice resonated in her prep chamber. I have never fought your kind before. The stories say you are soft. Fragile. Is this true? Kira began her warm-up routine, the movements ingrained from years of military training. Why don't you find out? The barrier dissolved, and Kira stepped into the pit. The crowd's roar turned to confused murmurs. Many had never seen a human fighter before. She could hear the bookmakers adjusting odds, various species placing last-minute bets against her. As she settled into her fighting stance, Kira allowed herself a small smile. They all thought they knew why humans were banned from professional fighting circuits. They believed it was about raw strength or durability, or some biological advantage. None of them understood the real reason. The match bell rang, its tone cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. The Kriaxian charge, crystal-plated fists ready to deliver a devastating blow. But Kira had already begun to move, her body responding to patterns she'd never seen before but somehow already understood. The real reason humans were banned wasn't about what they could do, it was about what they could become. And in the next few minutes, everyone in the Nexus Pits was about to learn why. Breaking the rules. 3 weeks after her first fight, Kira stood in her preparation chamber, wrapping her hands while watching holovids of her previous matches. The Kryaxian had been her first victory. Then came the Mecharen cyborg, the Vorlik pack warrior, and 5 others. Each fight had drawn larger crowds, higher stakes, and increasingly dangerous opponents. Your technique changes. The Draconid promoter, whom she now knew as Sith, observed from the doorway. Every match, you fight differently. The other fighters, they notice. They worry. Kira paused the holovid on an image of herself executing a move she'd improvised mid-fight against the Vorlik, a combination of 3 different martial arts she'd never formally trained in. Is that against the rules? Sith's scales rippled with unease. There are no rules about learning. But what you do, it is not normal learning. The others, they trained for years to perfect one style. You, he trailed off, mandibles clicking rapidly. I adapt, Kira finished for him. It wasn't just about copying moves she'd seen. During each fight, her body and mind worked together in ways she couldn't explain. Every punch thrown at her, every grapple attempted, became data her nervous system processed and incorporated. The military scientists had called it accelerated neural plasticity. She called it survival. The chamber's comm system crackled. Chen, your presence is requested in the owner's box. Sith's scales paled. The Syndicate masters rarely take personal interest in fighters. Be careful, human. Some questions are dangerous to answer. The owner's box hung suspended above the fighting pit, a crystalline structure that offered a perfect view of the violence below. Inside, 3 figures waited. A Nexian crime lord, his Q enforcer, and a being Kira had never seen before, humanoid, but with skin that seemed to shift colors like oil on water. Fascinating, the color-shifting being said, its voice bypassing translation devices to speak directly into her mind. You're not what I expected. The Nexian waved a tentacle. This is Archive Speaker Vex. He represents certain, interested parties. They have questions about your species. I'm just here to fight, Kira replied carefully, remembering Sith's warning. Oh, but you do so much more than fight. Vex's skin rippled with patterns that made Kira's eyes hurt. You evolve in ways that shouldn't be possible without genetic manipulation or cybernetic enhancement. Tell me, does your military know you're here? Kira's heart rate spiked. I'm retired. Are you? Vex glided closer. Our research suggests humans possess unique neurological traits. Your brains form new connections at rates that violate several laws of biology. In combat, this trait becomes pronounced. Below them, 2 fighters clashed in the pit. Kira watched their movements, her mind already breaking down their techniques, adapting them, improving them. She couldn't help it any more than she could help breathing. Your next opponent, the Nexian interrupted, will be Takar the Undefeated, a shadow-cased assassin. The betting pools are already reaching record levels. Takar has killed 17 opponents in the pit, Vex added. We will be monitoring your neural patterns during the match. For research purposes, of course. Kira recognized the threat wrapped in scientific curiosity. They wanted to understand how she fought, how she learned, how she changed, and they wouldn't let her leave until they had their answers. When's the fight? She asked, already calculating escape routes. Tomorrow night. The main event. The Nexian's tentacles writhed with anticipation. Do try to survive, human. Dead specimens are so much harder to study. Back in her quarters, Kira activated her secure comm unit, the one she'd kept hidden since arriving on level 47. Command, this is Chen. We have a situation. The Syndicate, they know about the adaptation protocol. And they're not just studying it anymore. They're trying to weaponize it. The response came in encrypted bursts. Maintain cover. Backup is inbound. Survive until extraction. Kira looked at her reflection in the grimy mirror. Her eyes held the same haunted look she'd seen in other combat veterans, People who'd been changed by war in ways they couldn't explain. But her changes were measurable, quantifiable. Each fight made her faster, stronger, more efficient. It wasn't just technique or experience. It was evolution in real time. Tomorrow, she would face an assassin. And if she survived, she would have to decide which was more dangerous: the Syndicate learning the truth about human combat adaptation, or what she might become if she kept fighting. The pit would have its answers either way. The truth emerges. The crowd's energy felt different tonight. Kira could sense it as she waited in the preparation chamber, the air thick with anticipation and something else. Fear. Not of her. Not yet. They feared Takar, the shadow-cased assassin whose very presence seemed to drain light from the room when he entered the opposite chamber. Your neural patterns are already changing, Vex observed from a monitoring station above. Fascinating. Your brain activity suggests you're fighting the match before it's begun. Kira ignored him, focusing instead on the holovid playing on the chamber wall, footage of Takar's previous fights. 17 deaths, each more efficient than the last. The shadow-cased warrior moved like liquid darkness, his exoskeleton absorbing light and sound. But in each kill, there was a pattern, a rhythm, a story written in blood and shadow that her mind was already learning to read. You know, Vex continued, his skin rippling with academic excitement, we originally thought human combat adaptation was simply enhanced learning, pattern recognition, muscle memory. But it's so much more, isn't it? The preparation chamber's door sealed shut. Match time. When other species fight, Vex's voice followed her through the speakers. They rely on training, instinct, genetic memory. But humans become. The energy barrier dissolved. Takar stood in the center of the pit, his form seeming to bend the harsh lighting around him. The betting boards above showed the odds, 100 to 1 against her survival. Begin, the automated system announced. Takar moved like his namesake, a living shadow. But Kira's eyes had already adjusted, her brain processing the subtle distortions in light and air that betrayed his position. The first exchange was brutal. His claws, engineered to slice through battle armor, met her forearms in a spray of blood. But something was happening, something that made Vex lean forward in his observation pod, his skin flashing with patterns of disbelief. With each cut, each near miss, each deadly dance, Kira's neurons were firing in new patterns. Her body wasn't just learning Takar's techniques, it was evolving to counter them. Muscles tensed microseconds faster. Eyes tracked movement patterns that shouldn't have been visible. Her very cellular structure seemed to be adapting to the physics of combat. Impossible, Vex breathed. Your genetic code. It's expressing combat-optimized proteins in real time. Your body isn't just learning the fight. It's becoming the perfect counter to your opponent. Takar must have sensed it too. His attacks became desperate, losing their fluid grace, but it was too late. Kira wasn't fighting him anymore. She had become an answer to everything he was. The end came quickly, a sequence of moves that hadn't existed minutes before. The crowd fell silent as the undefeated assassin hit the ground, unconscious but alive. Kira stood over him, her body already beginning to reset, to normalize. Now you understand, she said, looking directly at Vex at observation pod. This is why the military banned us from combat sports. Not because we're stronger or faster, but because every fight makes us more. We don't just adapt to survive. We evolve to win. The medical scanners were going crazy. Data streams showed her body returning to baseline, the combat-optimized mutations already fading. But the neural pathways remained, the knowledge, the evolution. She has to be terminated. A new voice cut through the silence. A syndicate executive had entered Vex's pod. If the gambling syndicates learned that humans can effectively evolve during combat, it would destroy the fighting circuits. Billions in revenue, gone. Too late, Kira spoke into her hidden comm unit. Command, you got all that. The pit's main doors exploded inward. TDF Special Operations teams poured in, their armor-bearing insignias that made even the Syndicate enforcers step back. Behind them came the science teams, their equipment already deployed to gather data. Kira Chin, her commanding officer's voice came through clear now. Mission accomplished. We needed proof that the Syndicate was investigating human combat evolution. You just gave us a live demonstration and a confession. Vex's skin had gone completely transparent, a sign of utter shock. You were bait. The fights were real, Kira corrected, watching as TDF officers secured the facility. The adaptation was real. That's what makes us so dangerous. We can't help becoming what we need to be to survive. And now everyone knows why. The truth about humans wasn't just that they could adapt. It was that they had to adapt. Every fight, every challenge, every conflict pushed their species to evolve. It wasn't a choice or a technique. It was the core of what made them human. And now the galaxy would have to deal with that knowledge. The Syndicate's fear. The Syndicate's emergency council chamber on New Singapore's Level 1 was a far cry from the grime of the fighting pits. Here, holographic displays showed real-time data from fighting circuits across the galaxy, each one representing billions in revenue. Every major criminal organization had representatives present, their faces, both organic and artificial, lit by the red emergency protocols flashing across the screens. The human problem must be addressed. The Nexian crime lord's tentacles writhed with agitation as he showed footage of Kira's fights. Look at the progression. Each match reveals something new, something dangerous. Archive Speaker Vex, now representing the scientific consortium, stepped forward. His skin had settled into a deep purple of concern. Our analysis confirms what the military already knew. Human neural adaptation in combat situations isn't just learning. It's directed evolution. Their bodies literally rewrite themselves to counter threats. The chamber erupted in multilingual chaos. A Drachnid warlord's translator cut through the noise. Impossible. Such adaptation would require massive energy expenditure. The cellular damage alone is absorbed and repaired, Vex interrupted, displaying Kira's medical scans. Their bodies have developed specialized energy management systems. The more they fight, the more efficient these systems become. It's exponential growth. Security footage from the pit raid played across the main screen. TDF Special Operations teams moving with inhuman precision, their movements clearly influenced by dozens of alien combat styles, all seamlessly integrated into something new, something evolved. They're not just learning our techniques, a Crayaxian elder observed. They're improving them, making them more efficient, more deadly. Worse, Vex's skin rippled with patterns of fear. They passed these adaptations on, not genetically, but through training. Each human fighter becomes a template for others to build upon. Their entire species is evolving through combat, sharing improvements across their neural networks. The Syndicate executive, who had ordered Kira's termination, stood slowly. The underground fighting circuit generates 17% of our total revenue. If humans are allowed to participate, they will dominate within months, not through strength or skill, but through constant evolution. They will become the perfect counter to every fighting style in the galaxy. Then we ban them officially, the Nexian proposed. Make it known that human participation in any combat sport, legal or otherwise, is forbidden. The penalties will not be enough, Vex interrupted. You don't understand. This isn't about fighting for money or sport. Every combat situation is an opportunity for them to evolve. They can't help it. It's hardwired into their biology. Security footage from other sectors began playing. Human dockworkers instinctively improving their techniques during routine brawls. Human security guards developing new defensive patterns during standard patrols. Even human children on playgrounds, their mock battles leading to subtle but measurable neural adaptations. Gods below, the Drachnid warlord whispered. They're all doing it. Every human who engages in any form of combat is contributing to their species' evolution. Now you see the real threat. Vex's skin had gone almost black. The TDF didn't ban humans from combat sports to protect other fighters. They did it to hide this ability, to keep the galaxy from realizing what humans really are. And what are they? The Crayaxian elder demanded. Living weapons, Vex replied. Each fight makes them better. Each conflict improves their species. Given enough time, enough combat experience, they could become. He trailed off, his skin showing patterns that translated to concepts of extinction-level threats. The Syndicate executives' cybernetic eyes whirred as he processed the implications. The ban must be total. No human participation in any form of organized combat. No exceptions, and we need to bury this information if it becomes widely known. The military already knows, the Nexian reminded them. That human, Chen, was their agent. They wanted us to discover this. No, Vex corrected, his skin showing patterns of sudden understanding. They wanted us to fear it, to enforce the ban ourselves. Because if we don't... The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. On the screens above, footage of human combat continued to play. Each clip showed the subtle signs of adaptation, of evolution, of a species becoming something more with every fight. The galaxy's criminal organizations had stumbled upon a truth they weren't prepared to handle. Humans weren't just another species to be exploited. They were an evolutionary force waiting to be unleashed. And now they had to decide what to do about it. The ban. 1 month after the raid on the Nexus pits, Kira sat in a secure TDF briefing room, watching as the galactic news feeds announced the unanimous decision. Representatives from every major fighting circuit, both legal and illegal, stood together. A sight unprecedented in galactic history. Hereby declare that human participation in any form of organized combat sports or underground fighting activities is strictly prohibited across all known space. Admiral Zhang, her real commanding officer, switched off the feed. Congratulations, Lieutenant Chen. Operation Evolution is a success. The criminal syndicates did exactly what we predicted. They chose to ban us themselves. With all due respect, sir, Kira flexed her hand, watching the scars from her fights fade as her body continued its endless cycle of adaptation and renewal. Why did we want them to ban us? Wouldn't our abilities give us an advantage? The Admiral's expression grew serious. Show her, he ordered, and Vex emerged from the shadows of the room. Kira tensed, but the arc of Speaker's skin showed patterns of alliance, not hostility. Your fights provided the final data we needed, Vex explained, projecting a holographic model of human neural evolution. What you experienced in the pits, the real-time adaptation, the cellular evolution, it's just the beginning. Look. The model expanded, showing potential growth curves that made Kira's breath catch. Is this accurate? Unfortunately, the Admiral confirmed. Every combat situation, every fight, pushes our species toward a threshold, a point of no return. If humans continued participating in combat sports across the galaxy, the cumulative effect of all that adaptation, we would become something else. Kira finished, understanding finally dawning. Something beyond human. Vex's skin rippled with academic excitement. Your species has a built-in survival mechanism that triggers rapid evolution under combat stress. But it's not just physical adaptation. Your neural networks reorganize, optimize, improve. Given enough combat experience spread across enough human fighters, we would develop capabilities that could destabilize the entire galaxy, the Admiral said grimly. Imagine thousands of humans fighting daily in arenas across known space, each one evolving, adapting, becoming more. Then imagine them teaching others, spreading those adaptations, creating a feedback loop of continuous evolution. Kira looked down at her hands, remembering how they had moved during her final fight, executing techniques that hadn't existed minutes before. The ban protects everyone else from us. No, Vex corrected, his skin patterns shifting to show deeper understanding. The ban protects you from yourselves. The Admiral nodded. We needed the criminal syndicates to enforce the ban because they control most combat sports in the galaxy. They'll be more ruthless and thorough than any official legislation. Their fear will keep humans out of the fighting pits more effectively than any law. And my fights? The raid? Kira asked. Gave them proof they couldn't ignore. The Admiral smiled grimly. Now they'll enforce the ban not because they're afraid of losing money, but because they're afraid of what humanity might become. On the screens around them, the announcement continued to play across every channel in known space. The galactic community would accept the official explanation that humans were banned due to unfair biological advantages. Only a select few would know the truth, that the ban was humanity's self-imposed restraint, a quarantine against their own potential. What happens now? Kira asked, watching her final fight play on one of the screens. She could see it clearly now. The moment when she hadn't just learned, but evolved beyond what she had been. Now, the Admiral's expression was both proud and worried. Now we keep this knowledge buried. The galaxy thinks they're protecting themselves from us. Let them believe it. Because the alternative, letting them know that we're capable of directed evolution through combat, would start a war we can't afford to win. Because winning would change us too much, Kira understood finally. Exactly, Vex confirmed, his skin showing patterns of both fear and respect. Your species has a choice. Remain human, or become something else entirely. The ban isn't a restriction. It's a choice to stay who you are. As Kira left the briefing room, she caught her reflection in a window. She looked the same as before her time in the pits, but she knew she wasn't. Like every human who'd ever fought, she carried the potential for change within her cells, her neurons, her very DNA. The ban would help them control it, contain it, preserve their humanity. But somewhere deep inside, in the parts of her that had evolved during those fights, she wondered if they were only delaying the inevitable. After all, adaptation wasn't just what humans did. It was what they were.